A blood-soaked German shepherd staggers to a lonely cabin in the Arizona mountains, collapsing with a desperate whine. What secret drove this loyal beast to its brink? Ethan Caldwell, a battle-scarred sniper who swore off the world, stares into its pleading eyes, unaware that this moment will unravel a conspiracy drowning in children's tears. Is he the savior they need, or the final pawn in a cartel's deadly game? Hit that subscribe button now and join us to 1,000 subscribers. Don't miss the shocking truth. The sun dipped low over the jagged peaks of the Arizona mountains, casting a blood-orange glow across the desolate expanse Ethan Caldwell called home. At 52, the retired Marine sniper had carved out a sanctuary in this forsaken corner near the Mexican border, a rickety cabin 3 miles from the nearest neighbor, 10 from the closest town, where the silence was his only companion. His weathered hands gripped a splintered chair he'd been mending, calluses tracing the scars of a lifetime spent aiming through a scope, waiting for targets that haunted his dreams. 30 years of war had left him hollow, a man who'd traded medals for solitude, until a faint sound shattered the stillness, a weak, insistent bark echoing through the dusk. Ethan's head snapped up, gray eyes narrowing as he scanned the horizon. Nobody came this far into the mountains by accident, not without intent, not without threat. His hand slid to the weathered pistol at his waistband, a relic from Afghanistan that felt like an extension of his soul. "Who's there?" he muttered, voice rough as the gravel under his boots, stepping to the edge of his porch. The barking grew closer, frantic now, and through the brush stumbled a sight that froze him mid-breath. A German shepherd, its black and tan coat matted with dust and blood, dragging itself forward on trembling legs. The dog wore a tactical vest, torn and shredded, with a patch reading Haven Rescue Canine. It locked eyes with Ethan, intelligent, desperate eyes, and let out a pitiful whine before collapsing at his feet. "Jesus," Ethan breathed, kneeling beside the animal. His fingers brushed the vest, finding a metal tag etched with faint scratches. He squinted, heart thudding as he deciphered the marks. Morse code. Handler in danger. A chill raced up his spine, sharper than the desert wind. This wasn't a stray, this was a soldier, a trained beast begging for help. The dog whimpered again, nudging his hand with a cold nose, its strength fading fast. Ethan's instincts screamed to turn away. Whatever this was, it wasn't his fight anymore, but those eyes held him, a silent plea he couldn't unsee. He carried the dog inside, laying it on the threadbare rug by his fireplace. "Easy, boy," he said, voice softening despite himself as he fetched water and a fur aid kit. The German shepherd lapped weakly at the bowl, then struggled to its feet, barking once, sharp, decisive, before staggering toward the door. Ethan grabbed his go bag, a habit from decades past, and checked his pistol. "You want me to follow you, huh?" The dog barked again, limping to the trail outside. Against every shred of logic, Ethan slung the bag over his shoulder and stepped into the twilight. This better not be a wild goose chase. The desert swallowed them as they trekked westward, the dog, whose tag named him Valor, leading with a determination that defied its injuries. Ethan's boots crunched over rocky terrain, his senses honed from years of combat, picking up the subtle signs. Tire tracks too fresh for this remote path, a glint of brass from a spent shell casing. He knelt, rolling it between his fingers, military grade, 5.56 mm. "Recently, not hunters," he murmured, glancing at Valor. "Not border patrol either." The dog whined, urging him onward, and after nearly 2 hours, they crested a ridge overlooking a small valley. Ethan dropped to his stomach, pulling compact binoculars from his pack. Below sprawled a compound, or what was left of it. Smoldering ruins marked where buildings once stood, shell casings glittering like fallen stars in the fading light. A charred sign at the entrance read, "Haven Rescue Canine, Rescue and Rehabilitation." Valor's vest matched the logo, and the dog whimpered softly, pawing the ground. "That's your home, isn't it?" Ethan whispered, dread coiling in his gut. "And something tells me you're the only one who made it out." He scanned the wreckage with the precision of a man who'd survived 3 combat tours. The attack was surgical. Entry points breached simultaneously, guard posts hit first, comms equipment torched early. Professionals, not cartel rabble. "What the hell happened here?" he muttered, lowering the binoculars. Valor tensed beside him, ears pricking at a distant rumble. Ethan froze, listening. Engines closing fast. "Someone's coming back," he hissed, pulling Valor behind a boulder. "We need to move." 3 black SUVs rolled into the valley, disgorging men in tactical gear who moved with military crispness. They spoke Spanish, but Ethan's years in Latin America decoded every word. "Check it again," one barked, clearly the leader. "Salazar wants no loose ends." Another replied, "What about the woman?" The leader smirked. "She'll break eventually. Everyone does." Ethan's jaw tightened. A woman, likely Valor's handler, was alive, captive somewhere south of the border. His gaze darted to the dog, whose blood-stained coat told a story of escape and loyalty beyond reason. He ducked into the ruins as the men searched, finding a hidden office behind a toppled bookcase. Amid the debris lay a half-burned photo, a woman in army fatigues, arms around Valor, captioned, "Captain Sarah Bennett and Valor, Afghanistan, 2023. Nearby, a shredded document mentioned Operation Genesis and Salazar cartel trafficking routes. This wasn't just a canine rescue outfit. It was a cover for something bigger, something deadly. Baylor growled low, sensing danger as the men's footsteps neared. Ethan grabbed a salvaged satellite phone, dialing Tom Reynolds, his old intel contact. "Tom, it's Caldwell," he said when the gruff voice answered. "I'm at a place called Haven Rescue. What do you know?" A long pause. "Jesus, Ethan, I thought you were done with this life." "That's a Pentagon front, K9S sniffing out trafficking tunnels. Stay out of it, there's a mole up high." Before Ethan could press further, Valor barked, a sharp warning. The men were too close. He cut the call, whispering to Valor, "Time to go, boy." As they slipped into the shadows, Ethan's mind raced. Who was Sarah Bennett? What was Operation Genesis? And why had Valor chosen him, a washed-up sniper hiding from the world, to unravel this nightmare? The desert night stretched ahead, vast and unforgiving, promising answers only at a price. The night deepened over the Arizona mountains, a shroud of stars barely piercing the ink-black sky as Ethan Caldwell and Valor crouched in the shadows of the ruined Haven Rescue compound. The rumble of the cartel SUVs faded as the men in tactical gear dispersed through the wreckage, their flashlight beams slicing through the darkness like predators' eyes. Ethan's pulse thudded in his ears, his grip tight on the salvaged satellite phone as he replayed Tom Reynolds' warning. "There's a mole up high." Beside him, Valor panted softly, blood still seeping from the gash on his shoulder, yet his ears stayed alert, tracking every sound. Ethan's instincts, honed by decades of war, screamed danger, but something deeper, something he'd buried under years of isolation, stirred at the sight of the dog's unwavering resolve. "We can't stay here," Ethan whispered, scanning the ridge for an escape route. The men below moved with purpose, kicking through debris, hunting for evidence or survivors. He needed answers, and the burned scraps he'd found hinted at a truth too dark to ignore. Slipping the photo of Captain Sarah Bennett and the shredded document into his jacket, he motioned to Valor, "Lead the way, boy." The German shepherd rose, limping but determined, guiding him along a narrow trail away from the valley. Each step sent a jolt of pain through Ethan's grazed leg, a stray bullet from the earlier ambush reminding him how close he'd come to being another ghost in this desert. They moved for an hour, the terrain growing rougher, jagged rocks and thorny scrub clawing at their path. Ethan's mind raced, piecing together fragments. Haven Rescue wasn't just a canine outfit, it was a Pentagon front targeting cartel trafficking tunnels. The document's mention of Operation Genesis gnawed at him. What kind of mission justified torching a place like this? And those names, 12 children, scribbled in hasty ink, each paired with ages and dates of disappearance. He stopped, pulling the list from his pocket, the paper crinkling under his calloused fingers. Sofia Alvarez, 10, Miguel Alvarez, 12. A knot tightened in his chest. Kids. This wasn't about drugs or guns. It was about human lives, small and defenseless. Valor whined, nudging his knee, urging him to keep moving. All right, Ethan muttered, shoving the list back. They reached a shallow cave carved into a cliffside, a temporary refuge from the wind and whatever hunted them. He patched Valor's wound with the first aid kit, the dog's flinch a silent testament to its pain. "You're tougher than me, boy," he said, tying the bandage tight. Valor licked his hand, a fleeting warmth in the cold. Ethan leaned against the rock wall, dialing Tom again on the satellite phone, its signal flickering like a dying pulse. "Tom, talk to me," he said when the line crackled to life. His old friend's voice was terse, edged with urgency. "Ethan, you're stepping into a hornet's nest. Haven was tracking Salazar's tunnels. Kids, mostly, smuggled for God knows what. Operation Genesis is classified, but it's big. Too big for a lone wolf like you." Ethan's grip tightened. Then why hit it? Why leave Valor as the only survivor? A pause stretched too long. "Because someone sold them out," Tom finally said. "A mole? High up?" "FBI may be higher. If you're in this, there's no backup, no extraction. Walk away, Ethan." Ethan glanced at Valor, the dog's steady gaze cutting through the darkness. "Can't do that," he said quietly. "They've got a woman, Sarah Bennett, and kids. I've got names, Tom, 12 of them." Tom cursed under his breath. "You're a damn fool. All right, I'll dig deeper, but watch your back. Salazar's men don't leave loose ends." The call ended abruptly, leaving Ethan with the echo of his friend's warning and the weight of a choice he hadn't wanted to make. He barely had time to process it when headlights slashed across the desert below. 3 black SUVs, engines roaring as they barreled down a forgotten trail. "They're tracking us," Ethan hissed, pulling Valor deeper into the cave. His leg throbbed, blood soaking his pant leg, but adrenaline drowned the pain. The vehicle stopped a quarter-mile out, disgorging 6 men armed with rifles and night vision goggles. Ethan's sniper instincts kicked in. He counted their movements, clocking the leader's barked orders in Spanish. "Find the dog, and whoever's with it, no witnesses." "Guess we're popular," Ethan muttered, checking his pistol. 8 rounds left. Valor growled low, hackles rising, but Ethan pressed a hand to his flank. "Stay, boy. We're not fighting yet." He scanned the cave, spotting a narrow ledge leading to a higher vantage point. Gritting his teeth against the pain, he climbed, Valor scrambling after him despite his injury. From above, he watched the men fan out, their lights creeping closer. One paused, kicking over a rock near the cave's mouth, and Ethan's breath caught. His blood trail, a crimson thread leading straight to them. A shot rang out, ricocheting off the cliffside inches from his head. "Move!" Ethan barked, shoving Valor along the ledge as bullets chipped the stone behind them. They bolted into the open desert, the night erupting into chaos, engines revving, shouts piercing the air. Ethan zigzagged through the scrub, Valor at his heels, leading them toward a dry wash where the terrain might hide their tracks. His lungs burned, legs screaming with every step, but he pushed on, the list of names searing into his mind like a brand. They ducked into the wash as an SUV crested the ridge above, its headlights bathing the ground in white fire. Ethan flattened against the dirt, pulling Valor close, the dog's ragged breathing hot against his arm. The vehicle slowed, a man leaning out with a rifle. "Lost them," he grunted in Spanish. "Keep searching, they can't get far." The engine roared off, but Ethan knew it wasn't over. He looked at Valor, the dog's eyes glinting with a fire that mirrored his own. "Wow me," he whispered. "Of all the people in these mountains, why a washed-up grunt like me?" Valor whined, nudging him forward as if to say, "Because you're the one who'll fight." The chase was on, and with it, a question Ethan couldn't shake. Could he outrun Salazar's hunters, or was this the end of his quiet exile? The desert night stretched endlessly before Ethan Caldwell as he and Valor crouched in the dry wash, the growl of cartel engines fading into an uneasy silence. Moonlight spilled across the Arizona-Mexico borderlands, a silver sheen glinting off the rocks like a blade's edge, illuminating the blood trail Ethan's wounded leg had left behind. His breaths came shallow, chest tight from the chase, but Valor's steady gaze, piercing even through the pain of his own injury, kept him anchored. The German shepherd's vest hung in tatters, yet he stood ready, ears twitching at every rustle of the wind. Ethan wiped sweat from his brow, the list of 12 children burning a hole in his pocket. "We're not done yet, boy," he muttered, steeling himself for the fight ahead. He'd made his choice. Sarah Bennett, Valor's handler, was alive, and those kids were out there, trapped in Victor Salazar's grip. The border loomed just a mile south, a lawless line where Ethan's past as a Marine sniper could either save them or bury him. He patched his leg with a strip torn from his shirt, the sting sharpening his focus. "Santa Elena," he said, recalling the name from the shredded document. "That's where they've got her!" Valor barked once, a low, decisive sound, and took off toward the boundary, forcing Ethan to follow or be left behind. Every step was a gamble, but the dog's faith in him was a chain he couldn't break. Crossing into Mexico felt like stepping into a memory. Dusty trails he'd patrolled years ago, hunting cartel lieutenants under a different flag. Now, it was just him, Valor, and a pistol with 8 rounds against an empire. They moved fast, skirting known patrol routes, Valor's senses picking up threats long before Ethan's eyes could. By midnight, Santa Elena emerged on the horizon, a cluster of whitewashed buildings under Salazar's iron rule, where new trucks gleamed in a poor town and men on corners hid weapons beneath their jackets. Ethan pulled a straw hat low over his face, shedding his tactical gear for worn jeans and a faded shirt. Valor's vest came off too, replaced by a simple collar. "Just a local and his dog," he murmured, adopting a stooped walk as they slipped into the town's dusty streets. Eyes followed them from shadowed doorways, conversations dying as they passed. Ethan's Spanish, rusty but fluent, caught snippets of fear. Salazar's men, the American woman, his gut twisted. Sarah was here and time was bleeding out. Valor froze near a side street, nose twitching, then veered toward a sprawling compound on the town's eastern edge. High walls, armed guards, a fortress disguised as a hacienda. Ethan ducked into an abandoned building across from the gate, peering through cracked windows with his binoculars. 6 guards patrolled outside, but the real threat lay within. "She's in there," he whispered, and Valor's soft woof confirmed it. He scavenged a piece of Sarah's clothing from Haven's ruins, a torn sleeve stuffed in his pack, and let Valor sniff it. The dog's tail stiffened, eyes locking on the hacienda. "Find her, boy," Ethan said, and they moved, shadows among shadows, exploiting a delivery truck's distraction to slip past the outer gate. Inside, the compound buzzed with cartel muscle, men with rifles and cold stares. But Valor led with eerie precision, navigating corridors to a basement stairwell. 2 guards stood at a heavy door, chatting in low tones. Ethan signaled Valor to stay, then struck. Silent, swift, disarming, one with a chokehold, the other with a pistol butt to the temple. "Good job staying put," he told Valor, easing the door open. Beyond it lay a makeshift cell, dank and dim, where Captain Sarah Bennett sat bound on a metal cot. Her wrists bled beneath the ropes, her army fatigues torn, but her hazel eyes blazed with defiance. "Who the hell are you?" she rasped, voice hoarse from days of captivity. Before Ethan could answer, Valor bounded past him, whining as he pressed against her. Sarah's composure cracked. Tears welled as she buried her face in his fur. "Valor, how?" Ethan cut her bonds with a knife, his own voice steady despite the chaos. "Ethan Caldwell. I'm the rescue party. Can you walk?" She flexed her stiff limbs, grimacing. "I'll manage." As he helped her up, she grabbed his arm, urgency sharpening her words. "We can't leave yet. There's more." Ethan tensed. "More what?" Sarah's gaze hardened. "Children. They're moving them tonight, dozens locked in the East Wing." His mind flashed to the list, to Sofia Alvarez's name. "How many?" he pressed. "At least 12, she said. "I overheard the guards. Special merchandise for Salazar's big project." Ethan checked his watch. 1:15 a.m. "Getting you out was hard enough. Kids too?" Sarah's jaw set. "I'm not leaving without them." The stakes skyrocketed. 12 lives, maybe more, against impossible odds. Ethan handed her a pistol from a fallen guard. "Expert marksman?" She checked it with practiced ease. 3 years running. He nodded, a grim smile tugging his lips. "Good. We'll need it." They crept toward the east wing, Valor leading, when the dog froze, growling softly. Footsteps echoed, guards approaching. They hid as 2 men passed, muttering about the shipment at midnight. Ethan's blood ran cold. "We're cutting it close," he whispered. At the east wing's door, soft crying seeped through the wood. Ethan peered inside. 12 children, filthy and frail, huddled on the floor. A girl, maybe 10, looked up, wide brown eyes locking on him. "Sofia?" he asked, voice low. She nodded, trembling. "They took my brother." A fire ignited in Ethan's chest. "We're getting you out," he promised, but alarms blared before he could move. Salazar's voice crackled over a loudspeaker. "Find the intruders. No survivor." Bullets tore through the walls as Ethan barricaded the door, Sarah firing back, Valor snarling at the chaos. "We're trapped," she shouted. Ethan grabbed a chair, smashing a window. "Not yet." He lifted Sofia out first, then the others, one by one, as gunfire closed in. Valor leaped through last, a bullet grazing his flank. They fled into the night, a stolen SUV their lifeline, but Ethan knew Salazar wouldn't let them go easy. "Hold on," he growled, flooring the gas as headlights flared behind them. The stolen SUV roared through the Mexican night, its tires kicking up clouds of dust as Ethan Caldwell gripped the wheel, weaving wildly to dodge the cartel headlights blazing in the rearview mirror. Sarah Bennett braced against the dashboard, her blood-streaked hand clutching the pistol, her breath sharp with pain from days of captivity. In the back, 12 children huddled together, their whimpers drowned by the engine's growl. Sofia Alvarez clutching a younger boy, her wide eyes fixed on Valor, who lay slumped across the seat, blood oozing from a fresh graze on his flank. Ethan's knuckles whitened, his mind racing. They'd escaped Victor Salazar's hacienda, but the chase was far from over. "Hang on, boy," he muttered, glancing at Valor's labored breathing. "We're not losing you yet." Sarah twisted to check their pursuers, 2 SUVs closing fast, muzzle flashes spitting fire from their windows. "They're gaining!" she shouted, firing back through the shattered rear glass. A bullet punched through the dashboard, inches from Ethan's arm, and the kids screamed, curling tighter into each other. "We can't outrun them on this road," Ethan growled, scanning the terrain. He spotted a dry riverbed veering west and yanked the wheel hard, the vehicle bouncing violently as it plunged off the pavement. The kids jolted, Sofia's voice rising. "Don't let them take us back!" Ethan met her gaze in the mirror, a silent vow burning in his chest. "Not on my watch." The riverbed's rocky bed jarred their bones, but it bought them a sliver of cover. Ethan pushed the SUV to its limit, dodging boulders as Sarah leaned out, her shots forcing one pursuer to swerve. "Where are we headed?" she asked, voice tight. "Diablo Canyon," Ethan replied. "Old Smuggler's Trail. Rough, but it'll get us across the border." The plan was thin, desperation masquerading as strategy, but it was all they had. Suddenly, a deafening crunch. Metal screamed as the second cartel vehicle rammed their tail, sending the SUV fishtailing. Ethan fought the wheel, but a tire blew and they skidded to a halt, dust choking the air. "Out now," Ethan barked, kicking his door open. He scooped up Valor, the dog's weight a dead pull against his wounded leg, and shoved the kids toward a narrow canyon ahead. Sarah covered them, her pistol barking as she dropped a gunman leaping from the enemy SUV. Bullets whined past, one grazing Ethan's shoulder, but he stumbled on, herding the children into the shadows. "Keep moving," he yelled, setting Valor down behind a rock. The dog growled, struggling to rise, but Ethan pressed him back. "Stay, boy, you've done enough." Sarah caught up, blood soaking her shirt from a reopened wound. "They're too close," she panted, reloading with trembling hands. Ethan peeked out, 6 men advancing, rifles raised, their silhouettes stark against the moonlit canyon walls. He fired twice, dropping one, but ammo was low. 4 rounds left. "We need a miracle," he muttered. Then, salvation crackled through the satellite phone in his pack. "Ethan, it's Tom," the voice rasped. "I've got intel. Genesis is a slave tunnel network, kids as labor. But listen, there's a traitor in the FBI feeding Salazar your moves. Get to a safe house. Coordinates incoming." The line cut to static, replaced by a distant boom that echoed through the night. Ethan's guts sank. "Tom?" he whispered, but only silence answered. Seconds later, headlights flared from the north. American soil, a safe house 2 miles away. He sent the coordinates to Sarah. "That's our shot," he said, lifting Valor again. They bolted, the kids stumbling over rocks, pursued by shouts and gunfire. The safe house loomed, a nondescript ranch surrounded by open desert, when floodlights snapped on and a dozen figures emerged, weapons drawn. "Freeze!" a woman's voice snapped. Special Agent Laura Hayes stepped forward, her FBI badge glinting, her smile cold. "You've been busy, Caldwell." Ethan's blood froze. Hayes had briefed him days ago, promising support. "You're with us," he said, voice low. She laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Salazar pays better. Drop the gun or the kids die first." Sarah lunged, shielding Sophia, but a mercenary's blade flashed, slicing deep into her side. She gasped, collapsing, blood pooling beneath her as Sophia screamed, "No!" Ethan fired, dropping 2 men, but Hayes' team closed in. Valor, defying his wounds, launched himself at a gunman aiming at Ethan, teeth sinking into flesh. The man howled, pistol firing wild, and Valor yelped as a bullet tore through his hind leg. "Boy!" Ethan roared, tackling another attacker, his fists a blur of rage. But they were outnumbered, pinned, the children sobbing as Hayes raised her weapon. "You should have stayed retired," she sneered, finger tightening on the trigger. Then, a chopper's roar split the sky, a Black Hawk, unmarked, swooping low. Colonel Daniel Pierce's voice boomed over a loudspeaker. "Stand down, Hayes!" Shots rang out from above, mercenaries scattering as Pierce's team rappelled down. Ethan dove to Sarah, pressing his hands to her wound. "Stay with me," he pleaded, her eyes fluttering. Valor crawled to her side, whimpering, his fur matted with blood. Pierce landed, barking orders. "Medics, now!" A team swarmed in, stabilizing Sarah as Ethan knelt by Valor, stroking his head. "You did it, boy," he choked out, tears burning his eyes. "You brought us home." The kids clung to each other, Sophia's sobs echoing as medics lifted Sarah onto a stretcher. Valor's breathing steadied under Ethan's touch, but the cost was etched in every drop of blood staining the sand. Hayes vanished into the chaos, a traitor uncaught, and Tom's silence gnawed at Ethan. He was gone, a casualty of the truth. As the chopper lifted off, Ethan whispered to Valor, "We're not done yet." The weight of 12 saved lives warring with the lost tearing at his soul. The safe house buzzed with controlled chaos as the Black Hawk's rotors faded into the Arizona dawn, its harsh light spilling over the desert like a judgment. Ethan Caldwell slumped against a wall, his hands stained with Valor's blood. The German shepherd now sedated on a stretcher, tubes snaking from his battered body to a humming machine. Across the room, medics swarmed Captain Sarah Bennett, her side bandaged but her face pale as death, her breaths shallow beneath an oxygen mask. The 12 children, Sophia Alvarez among them, huddled in a corner, wrapped in blankets, their hollow eyes darting between the adults who'd pulled them from hell. Ethan's leg throbbed, his shoulder ached, but the real pain was the silence where Tom Reynolds' voice should have been. A friend lost to a traitor's bullet. Colonel Daniel Pierce strode in, his stern face softening as he surveyed the scene. "You're damn lucky, Caldwell," he said, voice gruff. "Hayes slipped us, but we've got her team in custody. Sarah's stable, barely. Valor, too." Ethan nodded, too drained to speak, his gaze fixed on the dog who'd dragged him back into the world. Pierce knelt beside him, lowering his tone. "We found something on Valor, a micro SD card in his collar. Standard protocol for Haven operatives. It's a goldmine, names, dates, financials, proof Salazar's Operation Genesis isn't just trafficking kids for labor. It's a network, backed by our own people. Congressman Grayson's at the top." Ethan's head snapped up, exhaustion replaced by a cold fury. "Grayson, the border security hawk?" Pierce's jaw tightened. "The same. He's been taking Salazar's cash to bury investigations, greenlight tunnels. That card ties him to at least 50 missing kids, Sophia's brother included." Ethan's fist clenched, the list from Haven searing into his memory. "Then we take him down," he said, voice ablade. Pierce hesitated, his next words dropping like a bomb. "It's not that simple. We've got a play here. Use the evidence to negotiate with Salazar. He gives up the kids he's still holding. We delay the public fallout. Could save dozens more." The room spun. Ethan surged to his feet, ignoring the stab in his leg. "Negotiate? With that bastard? After what he's done?" His shout drew the kids' eyes, Sophia flinching as if struck. Pierce stood firm, unflinching. "Think, Caldwell. Blow this wide open now and Grayson's allies bury it. Red tape, denials, years of trials. Salazar vanishes with those kids, or worse, kills them to cut losses. We deal, we get them out alive. It's not justice, it's survival." Ethan's breath hitched, rage warring with logic. "Justice doesn't bend," he spat. "Not for this." Sarah stirred, her mask fogging with a weak exhale. Ethan crossed to her, kneeling as she gripped his hand, her voice a rasp. "He's right, Ethan. I saw them. Hundreds of kids in those tunnels. We can't lose them too?" Her eyes, clouded with pain, pleaded for him to listen. Ethan pulled away, pacing like a caged animal. "You're asking me to let Salazar walk? To shake hands with the devil who torched Haven, who shot Valor, who—" He stopped, choking on the image of Tom's last call, the explosion that ended it. "I can't." Pierce stepped closer, voice low but firm. "You're not wrong to want blood. I do too. But those kids, they're not pawns in your vendetta. They're flesh and bone, waiting to breathe free air. We've got a 48-hour window before Salazar moves his next batch. Deal or no deal, we hit him, but this card could tip the scales." Ethan's mind raced, torn between the fire in his gut and the faces on that list. Sophia's brother, Miguel, a boy he'd promised to find. He glanced at Valor, the dog's chest rising faintly, a soldier who'd never compromised. "What would you do, boy?" he muttered, knowing the answer. Sarah pushed herself up, wincing, her words cutting through the haze. "If we save hundreds, isn't that worth more than one man's head?" Ethan rounded on her, voice breaking. "And what about Haven? Your team, Tom, we just let that go?" She held his gaze, tears spilling down her cheeks. "No, we fight smarter. Together we can do both. Get the kids, then burn Salazar's world down, but alone? You'll die out there, and they will too." The weight of her words landed like a punch, cracking his resolve. Sophia crept forward, her small hand tugging Ethan's sleeve. "My brother, he's still with them, please." Her voice trembled, a child's faith piercing the storm in his soul. Ethan sank to one knee, meeting her eyes that mirrored Valor's when he'd first staggered to his door. "I promised you, didn't I?" he said, throat tight. "I'll find him." She nodded, clinging to hope, and Ethan turned to Pierce. "No deal with Salazar. We use the card to force Grayson out, make him sing, expose the network. Then we hit Salazar ourselves. No compromises." Pierce's lips twitched, a flicker of respect. "Risky as hell. Grayson could lawyer up, stall us. Salazar might kill those kids the second he smells a trap." Ethan stood, resolve hardening. "Then we move fast, faster than they expect. Sarah's right, we're stronger together." She managed a weak smile, gripping Valor's stretcher. "Knew you'd come around, Caldwell." Pierce sighed, rubbing his temples. "All right, I'll get the SD to my techs, draft warrants. But you two? You're on point for the hit. 24 hours to plan. As Pierce left to coordinate, Ethan sat between Sarah and Valor, the safe house humming with tension. The choice gnawed at him. Public justice risked delay. A deal with Salazar risked betrayal. Either way, blood would spill, and not all of it would be the enemy's. He looked at Sophia, then at Valor, their trust a chain binding him to this war. "We're not just saving them," he said to Sarah, voice low. "We're ending this." She nodded, fierce despite her pain. For Haven, for Tom. The desert sky bruised purple as night fell over the Arizona-Mexico border, a restless wind howling through the canyons where Ethan Caldwell and Captain Sarah Bennett prepared for war. 24 hours had passed since the safe house standoff, and now they stood at the edge of a makeshift LZ, Valor panting softly beside them, his hind leg bandaged but his spirit unbroken. Sarah, still pale from her wound, adjusted her tactical vest with a grimace, her eyes locked on the horizon where Salazar's secret airstrip waited, 20 miles south of Santa Elena, a scar of asphalt carved into the wilderness. The micro SD card's intel had cracked Grayson open like an egg. The congressman was spilling names to the feds, but Salazar's next move loomed. 20 kids and military engineers bound for a new Genesis site, set to vanish tonight. Ethan checked his rifle, a battered M40 he'd salvaged from his cabin, its scope a familiar weight against his calloused hands. "Wheels up in 10, he said, voice steady despite the storm in his chest. Colonel Pierce's team, 3 K9 handlers and their dogs. Loaded gear into 2 unmarked Blackhawks, their blades slicing the air with a low thrum. Sarah knelt by Valor, running a hand through his fur. "You sitting this one out, boy?" she whispered, but the German shepherd whined, nudging her as if to argue. Ethan caught her eye. "He's tougher than both of us." She smiled faintly. "Damn right." The choppers lifted off, skimming low over the border to dodge radar, the desert unrolling beneath them like a map of scars. Sophia's plea, "My brother," echoed in Ethan's mind, a tether to the promise he'd made. Pierce's voice crackled through their headsets. "Target's a private strip. Salazar's there, overseeing the loadout. Primary goal, secure the kids. Secondary, take him alive if you can." Ethan's jaw tightened. Alive wasn't his preference, not after Haven, not after Tom. Sarah gripped her pistol, her wound slowing her but not her resolve. "We end this tonight," she said, and he nodded, the weight of their choice. Justice over compromise. Settling like stone. They touched down 3 clicks out, boots hitting sand as the handlers fanned out, Martinez with his Malinois, Rex taking point, Williams and Chen covering flanks with their shepherds. Valor stayed close to Sarah, his limp a reminder of the cost already paid. They moved fast, night vision goggles painting the world green, reaching a ridge overlooking the airstrip. Ethan scoped the scene. A sleek jet idled on the tarmac, its engines humming, flanked by a dozen armed men. A truck sat nearby, its back open, 20 kids, some as young as 6, shuffling out under gunpoint, their cries muted by fear. Engineers in civilian clothes followed, herded like cattle. "There's Sophia's brother," Sarah whispered, spotting a boy matching Miguel's description, thin, defiant, shoving against a guard. "Execute," Ethan said into the comms, and the team sprang into motion. Martinez's squad hit the perimeter, silent takedowns dropping guards like flies, while Ethan and Sarah descended toward the truck. Chaos erupted as a klaxon screamed. Someone had tripped an alarm. Bullets sprayed, and Ethan dove behind a crate returning fire, his shots precise, dropping 2 men. Sarah flanked left, her pistol barking, but a guard tackled her, slamming her into the dirt. Her wound tore open, blood soaking her vest, and she gasped, struggling beneath his weight. Valor launched, teeth sinking into the man's arm, dragging him off as Sarah rolled free, clutching her side. The truck lurched, its driver gunning the engine, kids tumbling inside as it veered toward the runway. "They're moving!" Ethan shouted, sprinting after it. He leaped onto the tailgate as it swerved, the vehicle flipping onto its side with a bone-jarring crash. Dust blinded him, but he crawled into the wreckage, pulling kids out. 10, 12, 15, their terrified faces smeared with grime. "You're safe," he rasped, lifting a girl who clung to him like a lifeline. Sarah limped over, blood dripping, helping Miguel to his feet. "Sophia's waiting," she told him, voice cracking. But Salazar wasn't done. Ethan spotted him near the jet, barking orders as Grayson and 2 suits, FBI brass, traitors, climbed aboard. "They're bailing," he yelled, firing at the guards shielding Salazar. Valor, limping badly, charged a gunman aiming at Sarah, taking a bullet to his side with a yelp that tore Ethan's heart. "No!" he roared, rushing to the dog as Sarah covered him, her shots buying seconds. Valor's flanks heaved, blood pooling beneath him, but his eyes stayed on Ethan. Trust, even now. Salazar reached the jet's steps, grinning like a devil. "You can't stop this, gringo!" he shouted, his voice a taunt over the roar. Ethan aimed, but Grayson's face flashed in the window, a coward fleeing justice. "They don't get away," Sarah hissed, pulling a flashbang from her vest. She staggered forward, pain etched in every line, and lobbed it at the jet's landing gear. "Clear," she yelled, diving as the blast ripped through, shredding the wheel assembly. The plane lurched, nose dipping into the tarmac, engines whining as it stalled. Salazar emerged, fury twisting his features, and leveled a pistol at Ethan. "You've cost me everything," he snarled, firing. Ethan dodged, the bullet grazing his arm, and tackled Salazar, slamming him to the ground. "Those kids are why I'm still here," he growled, driving a fist into the cartel boss's jaw. Salazar laughed, bloodied but unbowed. "More will take my place." Ethan pinned him, rifle to his temple, finger trembling on the trigger. Pierce's voice cut through. "Alive, Caldwell." He hesitated, then smashed the butt into Salazar's skull, knocking him cold. The jet's door burst open. Grayson and his cronies stumbled out, hands raised as Pierce's team closed in, but Sarah wasn't done. "They don't deserve trials," she muttered, pulling a grenade. Lethal this time. Before Ethan could stop her, she hurled it, the explosion swallowing the plane in fire, Grayson's screams silenced in the blaze. Ethan stared, torn between horror and relief. "Justice," she said, collapsing beside Valor, tears streaming as she cradled him. "Stay with me, boy." The first light of dawn crept over the Arizona horizon, painting the desert gold as the Black Hawks thundered back across the border, their cargo a mix of triumph and scars. Ethan Caldwell sat in the lead chopper, his hands still trembling from the night's violence, his shoulder wrapped where Salazar's bullet had grazed him. Beside him, Captain Sarah Bennett cradled Valor's head in her lap, the German Shepherd's chest rising faintly beneath a medic's bandages. 2 bullets, one from Santa Elena, one from the airstrip, had pushed him to the edge, yet he clung to life. Across the cabin, 20 children huddled under blankets, their faces a gallery of fear and fragile relief. Miguel Alvarez among them, his thin arms wrapped around himself, eyes searching for the sister he'd lost to Salazar's tunnels. Ethan's gaze lingered on Sarah, her blood-soaked vest discarded, her side stitched but leaking red through the gauze. She'd crossed a line at the airstrip, her grenade turning Grayson and his cronies into ash, a choice that saved the kids but left a shadow in her eyes. "You okay?" he asked, voice rough. She met his look, tears tracing paths through the grime on her cheeks. "He's my hero," she whispered, stroking Valor's fur. "Always has been." The dog whimpered, licking her hand, and Ethan felt a lump rise in his throat. Vala had dragged him into this war, and now they were all bound by it, a thread of loyalty stronger than steel. The choppers landed at a secure FBI ranch outside Tucson, medics swarming to offload the wounded and the rescued. Colonel Pierce met them on the tarmac, his face a mask of exhaustion and resolve. "Salazar's in custody, singing already," he said, clapping Ethan's good shoulder. "Grayson's gone, thanks to Sarah's improvisation. The SD cards got the Justice Department in a frenzy. 50 kids traced, more to come. Ethan nodded, but his eyes drifted to Miguel, who stumbled forward, clinging to a medic. "Sophia's waiting," he told the boy, voice soft. Miguel's lips trembled, a flicker of hope breaking through his hollow stare. They moved inside, the ranch a hive of activity, social workers soothing the children, agents poring over maps and laptops. Ethan helped Sarah to a cot, Valor stretched beside her under a vet's care. "He's out of the fight," the vet said, adjusting an IV. "Legs too torn, retirement's his best shot." Sarah's breath hitched, a sob escaping as she pressed her forehead to Valor's. "You saved us all," she choked out. "My best partner." Ethan knelt, resting a hand on the dog's flank, feeling the faint pulse beneath his fingers. "Rest, boy," he said, voice breaking. "You've earned it." Pierce approached, a file in hand. "You two changed the game," he said. "Haven Rescue is dead, but we're rebuilding. Bigger, better, a task force, K9-led, targeting Genesis root and branch. Sarah, you're in command if you'll take it." She looked up, startled, then at Ethan. "Field's my world, not desks," she said, but Pierce cut in. "Exactly why we need you. Ground-level grit, not bureaucracy." Ethan watched her wrestle with it, the weight of loss and purpose colliding. "Valor stays with me," she said finally. Pierce nodded. "Non-negotiable." "And you, Caldwell?" Pierce turned to him. "Consultant role, tactics, security, your call. No red tape, just results." Ethan's mind flashed to his cabin, the solitude he'd once craved, now a hollow shell. "I'll think on it," he said, but the kids' faces, Miguel's, Sophia's, tugged at him, a call he couldn't ignore. Pierce handed him a tablet. "First reunions now, thought you'd want to see." Ethan followed him to a side room where Sophia waited, her small frame dwarfed by a blanket. When Miguel stepped in, she froze, then ran, crashing into him with a cry that shattered the air. "I thought you were gone," she sobbed, and he clung back, whispering, "They said you'd come." Ethan stood back, chest tight, the sight a balm to the night's wounds. Sarah joined him, leaning on a crutch, Valor's stretcher wheeled beside her. "Worth it," she murmured, and he nodded, unable to speak. The siblings' embrace was a lifeline, proof that amidst the blood and betrayal, something pure could survive. But Pierce's next words snapped him back. "Salazar named a new site, Chihuahua, 18 kids prepped to move. We've got 72 hours. Ethan's jaw set. Then we're not done." Outside, the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows over the ranch. Ethan and Sarah stood on the porch, Valor between them, his retirement a medal of honor etched in scars. The New Haven loomed in their future, a fortress against the darkness they'd faced, a beacon for those still lost. "We're a team now," Ethan said, meeting Sarah's gaze. She smiled, faint but fierce. "All three of us." Valor's tail thumped once, a quiet agreement, and Ethan felt the shift. His exile was over, replaced by a purpose he hadn't sought, but couldn't deny. Agents bustled past, plotting the Chihuahua raid, but for a moment they paused, watching the kids spill into a yard, laughing, tentative, alive. Sophia and Miguel held hands, their bond a spark against the void. Ethan's hand rested on Valor's head, Sarah's beside it, a silent pact forged in fire. "We haven't finished," he said, voice low, "but we've started." She nodded, eyes on the dawn, for them, for Tom, for the desert stretched ahead, vast and unforgiving, but beneath it burned a hope as stubborn as the dog who'd refused to give up. 6 months had passed since the airstrip burned, and the Arizona desert had softened into summer, its harsh edges blurred by the hum of cicadas and the shimmer of heat rising from the sand. Ethan Caldwell stood on a ridge overlooking the New Haven Rescue Facility, a sprawling complex 30 miles from nowhere, a fortress of steel and purpose where once there'd been only ruins. The sun glinted off training pens where K9 teams moved in sync, their barks sharp against the morning air. Beside him, Captain Sarah Bennett adjusted her cap, her side heeled but her gait still stiff. a reminder of the night they'd torn Victor Salazar's empire apart. Valor sat at her feet, his retirement official, his scarred leg a badge of honor beneath a polished collar engraved with Haven Hero. Ethan's cabin days felt like a lifetime ago, the solitude he'd clung to replaced by a rhythm of missions and faces, kids pulled from tunnels, handlers trained to fight the shadows. The New Haven wasn't just a rebuild, it was a revolution. Funded by Grayson's Fallout, its mission laser focused on dismantling Genesis remnants. 7 K9 teams now operated under Sarah's command, each a blade against the trafficking network still festering across the border. Ethan, a consultant in name but a soldier in soul, had turned his mountain retreat into their temporary HQ while this base took shape. "Never thought I'd miss the quiet," he said, voice dry. Sarah smirked. Liar. She wasn't wrong. The night Valor staggered to his door had rewritten him. Every rescue, every tear-streaked face chipped away at the walls he'd built. Today, they'd brief a new op. Chihuahua, Mexico. 18 kids locked in a cartel holdout, set to vanish in 48 hours. Colonel Pierce arrived by chopper, his boots kicking up dust as he strode over, a tablet in hand. "Sat imagery's fresh," he said, swiping to a grainy feed. "Compound's light on security, 10 guards, no heavy weapons. But they're prepping trucks. We move tonight, or they're gone." Ethan studied the layout, his sniper's eye tracing vulnerabilities. Helicopter drop, 2 teams, midnight hit. Sarah nodded, her focus absolute. "Martinez leads perimeter, I'll take extraction with you." Pierce raised a brow. "You're still healing." She bristled. "I've sat out enough." Ethan cut in. "She's good. Valor's the one resting." The dog's tail thumped, as if protesting, and Pierce relented with a grunt. "Wheels up at 2,200, no red tape, just results." He handed Ethan a file. "One more thing, intel ties this site to Grayson's old network, evidence there could bury the last of his cronies." Ethan's jaw tightened. Kids first, papers second. The day blurred into prep gear checks, comms tests, the handler's dogs pacing with coiled energy. Ethan caught Sarah by the kennels, her hands tracing Valor's old vest, now hung like a relic. "Miss him out there?" he asked. She sighed, eyes distant. "Every mission. He found me in Afghanistan, you know, after my last partner took a bullet. Didn't think I'd trust again till him." Ethan nodded, understanding too well. "Heck, me too. Guess we're his legacy now." She smiled, faint but real. "Damn good one." At 2,200, the Black Hawks roared to life, lifting off into a moonless night. Ethan and Sarah rode the lead bird, the handlers strapped in behind, their dogs alert. Rex the Malinois, eyes like flint, 2 shepherds steady as stone. The border slipped beneath them, a ghost line in the dark, and Ethan's mind drifted to Sophia and Miguel, safe now in Tucson, their reunion a spark that fueled this flight. 18 more, he muttered, gripping his rifle. Sarah squeezed his arm. "We'll get him." They landed 3 clicks from the compound, boots silent on sand as they advanced. Martinez's team splitting west, Ethan and Sarah east with the handlers. The site loomed ahead. A squat building ringed by wire, trucks idling in the yard. Ethan scoped it, guards lounging oblivious, heat signatures clustered inside. 18 kids, alive. "Go," he whispered, and Martinez's squad struck. Tranquilizer darts dropping sentries without a sound. Ethan breached the east door, Sarah at his 6, her pistol steady despite the tremor in her step. Inside, the air stank of fear. 18 children on cots, some crying, others too numb to react. A boy, maybe 7, bolted upright. "Who are you?" he asked, voice small. Ethan knelt, soft but firm. "Friends, we're taking you home." Sarah organized them, older kids pairing with younger, a quiet efficiency born of Haven's drills. But a guard stumbled in, bleary-eyed, and Valor's absence hit hard. Ethan tackled him, zip-tying his wrists, no dog to back him up. "Claire," he hissed, and they moved, kids shuffling behind. The extraction was textbook, trucks disabled, guards down, choppers waiting. Ethan counted heads, 18, all breathing, all free as they lifted off. The boy from the cot clung to his leg, whispering, "My brother's still out there." Ethan's gut twisted, Sophia's plea echoing anew. "We'll find him," he promised, knowing it meant more nights like this, more blood on his hands. Sarah caught his eye, nodding. She'd heard it too. Back at Haven, dawn broke over the ridge. The kids whisked to medics, their futures uncertain but alive. Ethan stood outside his old cabin, now a memory dwarfed by the base below. Sarah joined him, valor hobbling over his retirement, a quiet victory. "I'm not going back," he said, staring at the mountains. "Not alone." She lit a candle, a ritual for Haven's lost. Its flame flickering against the wind, "For them," she said, and they watched it burn. A silent vow. The boy's words lingered. More kids, more tunnels, a war unending. Ethan rested a hand on Valor's head, Sarah beside him, their path clear. "We've started something," he said. She grinned, fierce, "And we'll finish it." Below, Haven pulsed with life. A beacon forged from ashes, its mission as relentless as the dog who'd sparked it all.